bonsoir, bienvenue, good evening. I'm Nantali Ndongo. I am your MC tonight, but I'm also the arts and culture contributor at CBC Montreal for Daybreak and TV News at 6. And I'm the host of The Bridge, which is a Saturday program about arts and culture in the province. And welcome. And I was supposed to say here that I'm glad to serve as the MC. I'm stoked. For this very special event, the 2018 Beatty Memorial Lecture with Roxane Gay. Before we begin, the Beatty Memorial Lecture Series would like to acknowledge that McGill University is situated on unceded land, which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst indigenous peoples, including the Ganegahaga, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe nations. McGill honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of this land, of the lands and waters on which we meet today. Now, please join me in welcoming McGill's 17th Principal and Vice Chancellor, Suzanne Fortier, to say a few remarks.
Merci beaucoup et bonsoir à vous tous. Quel plaisir de voir cette belle salle remplie de gens pour cette présentation ce soir. It's such a thrill to see all of you here for this great lecture this evening. As you know, the Beatty Memorial Lecture takes place once again during our homecoming weekend, and a homecoming that will be 3 days of really fantastic events at our two campuses and welcoming back to McGill all of our alumni. I'd like, in fact, to extend a very warm welcome to all of our students, our alumni, our faculty member, our staff, the general public who are here, members of the public who are here with us this evening for an event that is sold out. And I heard that it was sold out very rapidly because we're all so excited with our guests this evening. And I must say that it's a real pleasure for me and an honor to extend a very, very warm welcome to Professor Roxane Gay. As you may know, this is not the first time that she's here in Montreal. In fact, she knows our city very well, so it's great to be able to tell her welcome back to Montreal. Before we have this great opportunity to hear her, I want to say just a few words about the Beatty Lecture. As you know, the lecture is named in honor of Sir Edward Biddy, a former chancellor and chair of the board of governors of McGill University. Tonight, we take a moment to remember Sir Edward Biddy, as well as the legacy of the Beatty Lectures. Over 64 years, Beatty Lectures have taken the stage, shared bold ideas, and inspired audiences. And as we approach McGill's bicentennial celebration, this will happen in 2021, I celebrate with you the history of the Beatty Lecture and the many exciting lectures to come in future years. And with that in mind, I invite you to watch a preview of a short video trailer produced by the Beatty Archives Project that was led by the Office of the Vice Principal, Research and Innovation. I hope that you will enjoy this evening et je vous souhaite une excellente soirée. Merci beaucoup de votre présence.
The Beatty Memorial Lecture Series is named in honor of Sir Edward Biddy, Chancellor of McGill from 1921 to 1943, and the first Canadian-born president of the Canadian Pacific Railway. For 24 years, he steered the company through boom, depression, and war as the youngest railway president in history. Over the course of his lifetime, he united Canadians from coast to coast by rail, as well as through his commitment to education and the exchange of ideas. Like its namesake, the Beatty Memorial Lecture Series brings you our world's leaders, legends, trailblazers, and changemakers.
I mean, it's inconceivable for any Western democracy to subsist even for 10 years more if we didn't have, through progressive taxation, a steady transfer of resources from rich people to poor.
And we are all living in history. We are all living in a time of change. And the first thing we must understand is this change.
Imagine that you take the material in one galaxy, the material in another galaxy, neighboring galaxies, and you spread it all into a kind of uniform distribution of particles everywhere throughout space.
I only wish I could go back to Gombe and tell the chimps how interested you all are. Well, we have one short hour tonight for me to try and share with you something of the excitement of 19 years of research.
Economists imagined all human beings are just money-making machines, nothing else. All they do in their lifetime make money, and that's the goal of their life. That doesn't sound like a human.
I want to introduce a word here, citizen efficacy, the sense that people have that as a citizen they can really do something, right?
Thank you, Principal Fortier. And that was an important review of the kind of history, the kind of thinkers and people who have been here for this lecture. Now to introduce the rock star that you all have been waiting for. Roxane Gay is an acclaimed author, essayist, New York Times opinion writer, and associate professor of English at Indiana's Purdue University. She's published a novel, An Untamed State, 2 short story collections, IET and Difficult Women, the New York Times bestseller, Bad Feminist, which Time magazine described as a manual on how to be a human, and a memoir, Hunger, a memoir of my body. Her writing has appeared among many best of collections, including Best American Mystery Stories, Best American Short Stories, Best Sex Writing, as well as in numerous publications such as Public Space, McSweeney's, Tin House, Oxford American, American Short Fiction, Virginia Quarterly Review, and many others. McGill is thrilled, Montreal is ecstatic, to welcome her as the 2018 Beatty Memorial Lecture. Please join me in welcoming Professor Roxane Gay.
Merci, merci Montréal. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight with you on this cold and rainy October evening. I mean, come on, guys. It was 30 degrees 2 days ago. You couldn't have made that happen today? What's happening? But it is a pleasure to be here despite the weather and to see so many lovely faces in the audience. And so I'm going to talk to you about things. And then Nantali and I are going to have a Q&A, and then we're going to actually open it up to the audience, because rather than read at you for an hour, I prefer to have a conversation. But before I get to my actual talk, I just wanted to read a little bit from my latest nonfiction book, Hunger, a memoir of my body. This is a book that I sold in August of 2014, just before Bad Feminist came out. And I was thinking about what I wanted my next nonfiction project to be, so I told my agent, look, let's get something over on the man in case Bad Feminist flops. And so let's sell another book. And she was like, yeah, okay. We miscalculated. And I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and I thought, well, the thing I want to write about least is my body. And in that moment, I realized, oh, shit. This is what I'm going to have to do, because I have always found that the things that I find most intimidating and the most terrifying often end up being the most intellectually and emotionally satisfying. And so this is a memoir of my body. And I wrote this book because oftentimes when we talk about fatness, we talk about it in the context of weight loss. We talk about it in the context of triumph, where a woman has lost a significant amount of weight and then she stands in half of her former fat clothes on a book cover and has all the answers. I do not have all the answers. I don't even have one answer. Instead, I wanted to just write about the truth of living in this kind of a body in a world that is, in general, wildly inhospitable to it. And so part of thinking about bodies and talking about bodies is thinking about exercise, which I hate. Exercise is truly just terrible, and it never gets better, and I keep waiting for that magical endorphin rush every day, and it never comes. And so I'm obviously broken, which is fine, I guess, but people are always trying to like motivate me and say, you'll get there. And I'm like, no, I won't. There is no there. This is it. And so this is just about how much I hate exercise. You're welcome. My disdain for sports and now exercise remains pure and constant. It feels like a waste of my time, moving around, sweating, and hoping something good will rise from that effort. Certainly, there are moments after a workout when I feel refreshed and powerful and healthy, but it is very easy to forget those moments when I need to change into workout clothes and go to the gym or go for a walk or do whatever the hell it takes to move my body. I generally dread exercise, all of it, and then I feel terrible about myself for being lazy, unmotivated, utterly lacking in discipline or self-regard because intellectually I know exercise is good for me. My hatred of exercise is unfortunate because exercise is necessary for the human body. It's a key component of losing weight and good health, blah, blah, blah. In the corner of my bedroom sits a recumbent bike. When I'm feeling particularly motivated about weight loss, I will ride that damn bike for up to an hour a day. It's a good time to sweat and catch up on reading. I own a few hand weights. I'll flex and curl when I remember to. I have a large inflatable ball upon which I sit to do abdominal exercises and squats and the like. I do not suffer from ignorance where exercise is related. I suffer from inertia. Over the years, I have joined countless gyms. I have worked with personal trainers, though grudgingly, given that I hate being told what to do, and that hatred multiplies when I am told what to do by someone who is thin and impossibly fit and usually gorgeous and charging me a significant amount of money on an hourly basis. I have a membership to Planet Fitness, though I have never visited the local facility. Basically, I donate $19.99 a month to their to their corporate existence and the idea that I can walk into a Planet Fitness anywhere in the country should I feel like working out. I have worked with personal trainers off and on over the years, recognizing that perhaps the support of a professional might help me improve my fitness. These days, my trainer is a young guy born and raised in Indiana named TJ. He is short and compact, and he has an unbelievable body. His whole life is fitness. He literally glows with youth, health, and the vigorous enthusiasm of having the world as his oyster. He is a big advocate of chicken breasts as a source of protein, and mustard as a condiment because mustard is fat-free and very low in calories. Not a session goes by when TJ doesn't mention some aspect of his diet that makes me so sad for him and his palate. I worry that he doesn't know about spices or butter or flavor or anything that makes food delicious. TJ never seems to know what to make of me because I do not glow and I am not young and I am not cheerful. He runs me through my paces, always offering me encouragement. He is not a nightmare trainer out to break my soul. He is genuine and kind and dedicated, and I suppose I am his albatross. I am his project. He's just so cheerful. He is a true believer in the benefits of a healthy lifestyle. He makes it all seem so easy as I pant and sweat and ache. I want to murder this man when we work out. I am generally terrified I'm going to drop dead at any moment, my heart pounding in my chest as I struggle to catch my breath. Sometimes when he asks me to do something that seems well beyond my body's abilities, I want to scream, "Don't you see that I'm fat?" I once asked this very question, and he said calmly, "That's why we're here." And I walked to my nearby water bottle, drank freely, muttering, "Fuck you." I curse at him on the regular, and he's always like, "Oh, it's okay. I leave my feelings at the door when I come to work at 5 a.m. Which, fuck you. So I wanted to read something funny before I tell you about the state of the world, which is not funny. Everything is terrible, and I wish it was different, but it's not. And so tonight I wanted to talk to you about Me Too and men who are trash. And yeah. I feel really bad for like the 4 men here, but no, I don't. This past year, as Me Too has gained cultural prominence, we have seen how necessary change can be excruciatingly slow, and that can be infuriating. When Harvey Weinstein and then several other men were finally held to account for decades of misdeeds, it finally felt like the beginning of something. For once, it seemed, women might not only be heard, but believed. Justice felt like a real, tangible thing rather than a vague, illusory ideal. But over the past several weeks, we've heard from men who transgressed against women and fell from grace. In Exile by former WNYC radio host John Hockenberry, which appears in Harper's, he is mournful for the life he lost after he was accused by multiple women of sexual harassment. He is aggressively self-pitying throughout his essay, airing any number of grievances about the injustice of how he has been misunderstood. And then at one point in the essay, he misunderstood Lolita and declared that romance was dead, as if sexual harassment in the workplace is some kind of grand romantic event, overture, that modern women who dare to stand up for themselves have cruelly forsaken. John Gomeshi, the former CBC radio host accused of sexual assault and harassment, also wrote a terrible essay, utterly lacking in self-awareness. In his Reflections from a Hashtag, published in the New York Review of Books, Gomeshi takes an almost pithy tone as he reflects on his life since he was accused of various crimes and sexual misdemeanors. He presents himself as the misunderstood hero of his own narrative, the rational man in an irrational world. And those are just the essays and publications I once respected. Even more impoverished accounts have been published elsewhere, men writing about how their lives have been derailed with no clear understanding of the lives they themselves have derailed with their own actions. Starkly lacking in any of these accounts is accountability or genuine recognition of the wrong done. These men display entitlement and rage and contempt for being seen as they truly are. The people who publish such pieces treat the perpetrators of sexual misconduct as intellectual curiosities. They reserve their empathy for these broken men. They reserve their empathy for themselves rather than for women because, as a culture, we expect women to suffer. We gild women's suffering with both inevitability and nobility. Time and again, women splay themselves. Women cut themselves open and share their painful stories. They bleed for this world that remains largely indifferent to their pain. Me Too was a reckoning, one that has been a long time coming, but far too many men are unwilling to face this reckoning and to recognize their role in bringing it about. Men are unwilling to reflect on how they treat women, how they understand consent, and how they don't. Instead, they say, not all men. They suggest that they are the good men. They tell women that harassment or assault isn't so bad, not really. Boys will be boys remains a popular refrain. I marvel that women still deal with men at all when there is such a lovely alternative. I'm talking about the joy of lesbian sex, to be crystal clear. I am often asked about hope. I am asked if I am still hopeful despite what I know of the world. I am asked if hope is possible in these troubled times. I am asked how to hold on to hope. I always respond as best I can, but those responses feel hollow because they are. I am not the kind of person who thinks in terms of hope. Certainly, I want to hope because I need to believe there is something better beyond the present, but I am more realist than optimist. Hope is too ephemeral, too inconsistent, too fleeting. We are in a brutal time. In the United States, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh faced accusations of sexual misconduct, and every day there is new information about men who have abused their position or acted inappropriately or committed crimes against women. Dr. Christine Blasi Ford testified in front of a panel of mostly men about the sexual assault she endured at the hands of Brett Kavanaugh. She took a polygraph supporting her version of events. She spoke her truth in front of the nation. Her entire life exploded because she had the courage to come forward out of a sense of what she called a patriotic duty. She considered the greater good. And still, there were people who doubted her, who did not find her credible, and if they did find her credible, they did not think that what she endured merited Kavanaugh losing a career opportunity. Judge Kavanaugh did not need to write down his woes in a bad essay. He was able to share them in front of an international audience in real time. When he spoke on his own behalf, he was all rage and righteousness, ego and entitlement. He cried, he glared. It was a grand and grotesque performance. Kavanaugh interrupted nearly every Democratic senator who questioned him. A year after the allegations against Harvey Weinstein were first reported, a federal judge behaved as a self-indulgent brat, unwavering in his conviction that he deserves to be on the Supreme Court. In his statements to the committee, Brett Kavanaugh said that the allegations against him had ruined his life, even though he was very shortly after that confirmed to a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court. The bar for a man's ruin is apparently quite low. May we all be so lucky as to have our lives so ruined. The bar for women's ruin, however, has no limit. That is a painful truth to live with day in and day out, and it is a disgrace. Womanhood should not be primarily defined by suffering, however gilded it may be. As of late, people have offered up all kinds of moving words about the strength of women in a world dominated by the whims of men. And the truth is, I often hate those words. I hate that they are needed. I hate that we are supposed to find inspiration in women merely surviving things they should never be expected to experience. I hate that this culture must constantly be reminded of the magnitude of what women withstand. I hate that even knowing the magnitude of what women withstand, this culture seems to think that we can handle even more. Or worse, they simply do not care. Women should not have to think of ourselves in terms of resilience or our ability to endure. We are capable of so much more, but we're too busy dealing with bullshit to demonstrate the full extent of our powers. We should be able to move through this world freely, safe and strong in our bodies. We should be able to thrive unfettered by the chronic malignancy that is misogyny. I am also often asked to define feminism, and I love saying that I no longer answer that question because, let's be real, it's 2018, and either you know what feminism is or you do not. Either you know that women deserve to be treated with equality and equity, to be seen as human, or you do not. If I absolutely had to offer up a definition, though, I would say that feminism is working to ensure that women are free to focus our energies on more than mere survival. I look back at this past year and I wonder when that might happen and what more it could possibly take. As a writer who engages with race, gender, sexuality, and culture, it often feels like I am writing the same thing in slightly different ways over and over, not because I lack imagination or a breadth of intellectual interests, but because so little truly changes for women or people of color or the LGBT community or the disabled. What we call progress is marginal change at best, and that marginal change only comes because women fight tirelessly to bring it about. And however incremental change is for women in the United States, the pace of change is far more glacial for women in many other parts of the world. We march, we share our personal stories, we cannibalize ourselves, we vote, though let us never forget that in the United States, only 47% of white women voted in their own best interests in the last election. We run for office sometimes. We take stands, great and small, in our personal lives. We try to advocate for ourselves and for each other. We live and love, we fight, we hope, and still, the socio-political structures that shape our lives remain immovable. We talk about resistance when what we need is a revolution. It has been a year of Me Too, a year of reckoning. I feel like I'm supposed to offer an uplifting message about how far we've come when, in truth, we have not come far at all. Yes, we have had a vigorous and necessary national conversation about sexual violence and harassment over this last year. We are starting to see men face consequences for the harm they have done. Bill Cosby is sitting in a prison cell and will probably rot there for the rest of his life. Harvey Weinstein will eventually face trial and hopefully, if he doesn't buy his way out of it, incarceration. More powerful men will lose their jobs and face the opprobrium of the court of public opinion when the truth of who they are is revealed. But how are we going to create lasting change? How will we ensure that the justice system better addresses sexual violence? How will we encourage the justice system to include restorative justice in sentencing guidelines? And more importantly, what will change for women? What especially will change for the most vulnerable women among us, the undocumented, women of color, working class women, single mothers? What will change for women who cannot afford to come forward when they are harassed or assaulted? As I consider this past year, what strikes me is how Me Too has mostly benefited culturally prominent, mostly white women. Those women deserve justice as much as anyone else, but they are the few among a great many women who deserve justice and acknowledgement. What will change for men who feel entitled to women in whatever ways they see fit? A few men have indeed fallen from grace. A few more men are worried they will be next because they know how they have crossed lines. A majority of men do not realize that they too are part of the problem because either they have committed sexual transgressions or they have looked the other way or they have not believed women. It has been a year of Me Too, but it has also been more than a decade because before the hashtag, activist Tarana Burke began the Me Too movement after meeting a young girl who had been sexually abused. During that encounter, Burke wanted to tell the young woman, "Me Too," but she couldn't. Eventually, she created a nonprofit called Just Be, dedicated to helping victims of sexual harassment and assault. She created a space where people could say, "Me too," so victims of sexual violence would always know that they are not alone. Today, we do know we're not alone. Today, we honor that space that Burke created as best we can. We know sexual harassment and violence are practically epidemic. We know change is needed. As we move forward, we need to figure out how to hold this space that Me Too has made for empathy and solidarity while working to create a culture where someday this space will not be needed. That, if anything, is what I hope for. Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm going to have an onstage conversation and then include you guys. And here she is.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. You're welcome, I guess, is what I should say.
Can I acknowledge that you are here during the 50th anniversary of Montreal's Congress of Black Writers.
Yes, you can.
Stokely
Carmichael was there.
Exactly. Stokely Carmichael, CLR James, here at this university, learning that information. 4 days where intellectuals and artists from Black communities in the US and in Canada and the Caribbean were here to share ideas. Learning that information, how do you feel?
I think it's an auspicious anniversary because 50 years ago that conference was held, but have we made a lot of progress since then? Has that conference been held since then? And I mean, in looking at the audience, there are not a lot of Black people here, but there are a lot of Black people in Montreal. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Good. Engage how you will, yeah. I've been calling you a rock star since last week.
I call myself a rock star every
do?
morning.
Oh, good.
I do.
So I don't feel bad.
I just wake up and I just say, "Good morning, rock star."
You are. And the reason why is, aside from that, you're great, but when people heard that you were coming, we know the tickets went really fast. And then more tickets were sold to the public and went even faster. A lot of people were disappointed that they couldn't make it into this space.
Yeah.
And felt that perhaps it was maybe missed at how great and how much people love you. Is that common?
That's common. It is, and it's weird. I'm often underestimated, which is fine. It's not fine, but I would rather be underestimated than overestimated, because you're going to learn. And yeah, so it happens. I think a lot of times people are just like, oh, a fat Black feminist. Like, who's going to listen to her? Lots and lots of people.
In your talk, you referenced the Kavanaugh case and Dr. Christine Blasi Ford. I'm wondering, in your opinion, what was the impact then of her testimony?
You know, I think the impact was showing that even when women come forward and when women are believed, it doesn't matter. It was, I mean, I think women already knew this, but now some men also know, which is useful. It was really disheartening. I felt for her because she was so poised during her testimony, and she had to be, and she was also erudite. She answered questions, she offered up psychological theory, and then Kavanaugh got up there and was just like a whiny child. Actually, let me not insult children. And there's no one, I can't even, I was gonna say animals, but let's not insult animals. So he was just a whiny Brett Kavanaugh. And it was really disappointing because he was so angry and so aggressive. And it wasn't angry because he had been accused of something, it was angry because of entitlement. That I have worked my whole life for this career opportunity. How dare you try to take it away from me? And it was just a debacle.
So considering that women might have already expected that outcome that we got, do you think her coming forward and ending up with the same results that we anticipated, that now more women are even less likely to come forward?
I'm not sure. I think that very few women come forward anyway, so it can't be less than it already is. But I do think that it is a reminder to women why we don't come forward. I am afraid that going forward, we're not going to see more women coming forward because there's nothing to gain. You're not going to get justice. You're not going to be believed. You may be humiliated. You may lose everything. She hasn't been able to go home in more than a month. She still can't go home. And that's just unspeakable.
You've recently also published an article. Actually, it was just after Louis C.K. kind of made his comeback
Yes.
And
I make friends wherever I go.
and your criticism was that, hold on, Louis C.K., who asked you to come back? And then he came back at a comedy event and got a standing ovation. My question is, what does society say to the women who were in the room who stood and clapped?
Sometimes it be your own people. Just, you know, I wasn't surprised by the women in the room that stood, because 53% of white women voted for Trump. And I'm going to say that over and over and over again because it's a horrifying statistic, because they're voting their own rights away. Now, I think some of the women stood because of peer pressure, because you don't, and it's why so many women are hesitant to call themselves feminists. You don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. You don't want to be seen as stepping away from the norm and from dominant culture. And so, you know, standing ovations, oftentimes you feel pressured into them, which is why they happen. Like, one person's like, I'm going to stand for this. And then the person next to them is like, oh, fuck. I guess I'm going to do it too. Like, I mean, we saw that here tonight. Just kidding.
No,
you guys
waiting,
all wanted
they
to
were
stand.
waiting to stand.
Yeah, no, I get that. But I think that sometimes people do feel pressured. And, if, you know, in a dark comedy club where everyone starts standing, like, you're going to just be like, well, I guess I better jump up too. But I also think some women were just like, yes, let's bring his shitty comedy back, which is disheartening. And to those women, I say that I see you, and I like knowing who people are, so when they tell me who they are, I do try to believe them. And there's going to come a time when you need feminism, and when something terrible happens to you, and you're going to want to be believed, and I'm going to believe you nonetheless.
In preparing for this conversation, I try my best to reach out to as many people in the Montreal community who I knew really wanted to be here but couldn't. And some people touched on something they wanted me to ask you. The question originally was framed really with regards to your thoughts on Black women, but I think this applies to any, let's say, marginal or underrepresented group. To have your thoughts on how these marginalized groups might work for or uphold or benefit from the patriarchy with their own fat phobia, queer phobia, transphobia, and that kind of lateral violence. And shout out to Shanice Nicole, who's a Montreal poet and activist, who asked me to ask you that question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The first thing I want to say is that oftentimes we expect marginalized people to be saints and to have no phobias. Like, oh, you're marginalized, so you better be perfect. And I think it's important to resist that. But I also think that when you're marginalized, somehow I feel like our capacity for empathy must be expanded, because we know what it's like to be oppressed. And so I think it comes naturally to not want to oppress other people. So when you're in a marginalized community and you participate in the oppression of others, I think it's important that we hold ourselves accountable and say, just because we're oppressed doesn't mean that we can't be called out when we make misdeeds. And I think it's important to call these things out or call in with love and with understanding, and say, I understand where this may be coming from, but there's a better way. You can be more accepting, you can be more open of difference. It has to start there, because going at it in a different way is not necessarily going to work or reach. And I also think you can point out that solidarity goes a long way, and that if marginalized people from different groups work together, oftentimes we will rise together.
As opposed to participating in Oppression Olympics or something
Exactly.
like that.
The Oppression Olympics never works, and no one ever wins anything. Is there really any satisfaction in saying, I'm the most oppressed? I mean, like, when you wake up, you're still going to be the most oppressed. So there's a better thing to do with that energy, and I strongly encourage all marginalized people to consider that. And also, I think it's important for us to reflect on the ways in which we hold privilege.
I'm going to take a moment and let people come in and ask questions, I think, before I continue with a few more of my questions, just to make sure that we don't miss people who are in the room. So do we have questions yet? And if we do, you raise your hand, and a microphone will come to you.
And make sure your question's a question, and not a,
So there's a microphone just behind you.
A question rather than a blog post, because you can go to your own blog for that.
Thank you for taking questions. I'm raising a 7-year-old son, and I'm just curious if you have any advice on how to raise a good man, given that there are so many good, strong women who have raised not so great men.
Whew, I know that's right. I don't know. I think that you just raise him to understand consent. You raise him to understand boundaries and to respect boundaries. I think that, and frankly, I think that's the way we raise everyone, regardless of gender, because when we respect each other's boundaries, I think we are less inclined to transgress them. And so many young men are raised with this sense of entitlement, that the world is theirs, that there are no borders they cannot cross. And that's not really healthy. It has not served the world well. And so I think a different approach would work, where we talk about boundaries and we say, you don't get to have everything you want just because you want it. And just manners, being polite, being well-read. If you have a daughter as well, making sure that you treat them equally in how you raise them, where one is not expected to do certain kinds of chores. I think every human being should learn how to cook and clean. I think that's just part of being a person in the world. And so just make sure that you're equipping him to go out into the world and just be good.
Considering that you come from Caribbean origins, Haitian background, how, in thinking about that question, how do we have the conversation with the communities where they come from, not here on North American soil, those kinds of constructs are deeply, deeply enrooted in traditions and values?
Oh, they're deeply rooted in North American values too. I think that change is important, and one of the things that we have to learn, those of us who are part of the diaspora, is that some change is in fact good, and that some of these misogynistic roles that we expect people to hold are not necessary anymore. I think you can preserve your culture without devaluing women and women's rights. And I really get frustrated when we talk about, well, culture is important, as if the subjugation of women is so integral to your culture. If that's the case, then your culture needs to be changed. And that's the kind of message that I think is incredibly important. And it's an uncomfortable message, but it's a message that needs to be heard nonetheless.
Do we have more questions? Yes. So I saw your hand, and then there's a hand over there.
There's hands all over. I see them.
So if we can get this young lady here, the mic is coming to you, and then we'll go to you in the back.
Called me a young lady. That's so nice. All right. So
Yes.
I'm going to try not to blog rage or whatever, but I'm really angry. And so what I want to hear you about, maybe just in terms of your vision, is when you're a marginalized person, if I can call myself that, but when you have multiple marginalized identities, in today's climate, it is extremely difficult to keep your mind straight, and to feel like you can feel comfortable in society. What is your vision on how people like that like me, can perform self-care in that environment?
I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. I don't know. It's really challenging. It's just challenging. But I think the most important thing to start with is recognizing that you deserve self-care. I also think it's important to recognize that you don't have to show up to fights that you didn't ask for. A lot of times we're asked to not only take care of ourselves and our families, we're supposed to save the world. In the United States right now, we're seeing a lot of black women will save us nonsense. because black women voted correctly in the last election. And people said that we did this like out of some sort of cultural salvation without giving us credit for doing it for ourselves. That we understood that of the two imperfect options, one option was going to serve us slightly less badly than the other one. And so I think that it's important to recognize your own autonomy and to not be pulled into these sort of salvation narratives that people demand of marginalized people, like, oh, you're so noble and you do all this. But you're allowed to be selfish. You're allowed to be petty. You're allowed to take care of yourself however you see fit. And that's not necessarily about, well, actually, it's not at all about like taking a bath or buying something expensive, because so much of self-care is tied up in capitalism. But for me, self-care is giving myself permission to rest, giving myself permission to not be everything to everyone at all times. And that's really what I encourage marginalized women in particular to do. Be there for yourself before you're there for anyone else.
And how do you prepare for when they call you a difficult woman or the other woman as a result of those choices?
I mean, feel free. You're goddamn right I'm difficult. Yes.
There was a hand at the back.
Yeah, hi. I have a question. How do we enlighten women? How do we, in my opinion, the 53% who voted to Trump are three groups. You have one group who don't know they were giving away their rights. You have another group who were they knew that this is the status quo, women have entitlement, it's fine, this is the normal, it doesn't change. And then you have the third who don't know that, oh, I'm giving away they don't know that the fact that I don't get equal pay, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. How do we get women to move, like what happened back in the day when they asked for their right to vote? How can that happen, and what in your opinion that can be utilized to do that?
I mean, I think your question is coming from a profoundly flawed place, because you're assuming that your three categories of the women who voted for Trump are correct. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think those women knew exactly what they were doing, and I think it's really important to give women credit for the decisions that they make, even if we disagree with them. I think those women knew that they wanted to be on the good side of people in power. And I think it was a very savvy decision given what's happened since 2016. I don't know how we reach women who are invested in power structures, but power is great. So how do we dissuade women from aligning with power? I think we come up with other kinds of power. And so we have to find those other kinds of power and then educate all women on the ways in which different kinds of power can benefit. I think that we have to show them that we're not taking anything away from you by suggesting that we need social welfare, or suggesting that we need universal health care, or suggesting that men shouldn't be allowed to rape women, or suggesting that women should be paid equally for equal work. And so I don't know how to reach the unreachable, but I sure hope we figure it out in the next 2 years.
Wait, oh, there's another hand, but I think did we miss somebody in this? Yeah, I had seen your hand, red shirt. Right?
Thank you for coming to Montreal. You're amazing. Definitely a rock star. Oh my God. I'm like so excited right now. Okay. So one of the things I think as like the anger bubbles up lately in various oppressed groups is it would be better to band together. And one of the things I saw in the last week was very interesting and really made me think, which is that obviously in the last year or longer, Colin Kaepernick started the movement of taking a knee, particularly for Black men being shot for no reason. I think he was inspiring to many people, and after the Kavanaugh appointment, you saw a lot of posts, now women should take a knee when the anthem is played, for the wrongdoing, obviously that's happening in the United States. But that caused a lot of differences in opinions over that being actually a disrespectful move. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because it was inspiring in a way, but the comments were interesting to read, and it really caused me to reflect.
Yeah, there's nothing disrespectful about taking a knee in the face of injustice. This idea that we need to stand during an anthem or in the face of a flag that seeks to oppress, like, oh, stand up to your own oppression? No, thank you, I'll take a knee here. It's bewildering. I'm still shocked that Kaepernick isn't working and that he has faced such ostracization for doing the right thing. He's a fantastic example of someone who used his privilege and made the necessary sacrifice to get people's attention. He hasn't stopped police brutality, but he has gotten our attention, and we're still talking about it nearly 2 years later. And more people need to be willing to do that, need to be willing to disalign themselves from power structures. He could afford to, though. And those are the kinds of people that need to be making these changes. As for women kneeling, I think that's also necessary, but we don't need to get any lower than we already are. We're good.
And is respect even a factor?
No, that's what's so shocking to me. And we also saw this during the Kavanaugh hearing, that people were like, oh my God, they're being so rude. We're talking about rights. We're talking about human dignity. And this idea that we need to respect symbols instead of human life and bodily autonomy is appalling to me. It's just staggering that we're still worried about these symbols that are going to be just fine, whether we stand, kneel, lie down, or tumble around them.
So I think you were next right here. Is there a microphone on this side? This young lady with, yeah. And then right here.
Yeah, I see you. We'll just start throwing microphones.
Hi, my name is Christelle. I'm the president of a Black student group here on campus. Thank you. So navigating white academic spaces is very hard for us, especially here. And I was wondering, given your experiences, if you have any tips for us.
Yes. Navigating white spaces, especially in academia, is incredibly difficult. And a lot is asked of Black students. The main thing I always tell students of color and Black students specifically is what I told this woman over here. You don't have to be everything to everyone. Oftentimes, because there are so few Black students in these white spaces, you're expected to be representative of your entire culture. You're expected to be on 500 committees. You are expected to be an officer in each of the 3 Black organizations on campus. And then you don't have time to have fun, which is what college is supposed to be. And you don't have time to study, which is what also college is supposed to be for. And you spend all your time surviving. And I get it, but I think it's important to remember why you're here and to focus on that. I also think that you have to find allies where you can, and that sometimes those allies are going to be white people. Sometimes those allies are not going to be Black faculty who are invested in these power structures that I've been talking about and who are more interested in their proximity to whiteness than to helping other Black people. And that's one of the most painful things about these spaces, is that not everyone is your friend who looks like you. I think it's important to pick your battles and to know which things that you're going to fight for with the administration and which things you're just going to let go. And you also have to keep your eyes on the long game. The hard thing about universities is that every 4 years, new blood comes in and they have to start the same fight over and again. So you want to think about how you can document the activism that you're doing so that when people come in 4 years, they're not starting from square one, they're starting from square 5 and helping to move forward the very hard work that you've already put in.
As a member of faculty, how are you having that conversation, those conversations with your colleagues, with your deans, with the people who have the power?
Yeah, you know, I do the best that I can. I did a lot at my first academic job at Eastern Illinois University. And one of the key things was making sure that we were not going to run these poor kids into the ground, asking them to do 500 different things. Like, one thing that drove me crazy was when they were like, let's get them to plan the Martin Luther King celebration. I mean, like, when were they supposed to do that? After they take a full course load? I mean, come on. And so that was really important to me. And at my current position, I'm honestly not there that much. But I do demand that we don't accept only one black student at a time in my specific program, because it's not that when we accept two, they're going to be best friends, because that doesn't work. But there can never be just one. I think that's so isolating and so unhealthy for the student. And so I try to do the kinds of things that I can quietly and administratively, and I need to do more. So I think, but I'm hard on myself, but I also think we can always do more. Like, when you get to this position, especially now that I have tenure, I have no fucks to give.
Doing the gun signs over here. No, not really. The laser signs over here. You had a question, and then we're going to come to this side for a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come up there,
and
too.
We'll come back around.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, I love you so much.
Come
I'm sure many people
on.
do.
Thank
Something
you.
I hear writers say a lot is that they don't write about anything that they haven't sort of dealt with or overcome. And when I read your book, Hunger, I felt like it was very much the opposite of that advice. And I just thought it was so brave and raw, the places that you went to in that book. And especially, sorry, I won't blog post, but one thing that was really impressive was just like, it felt like you were very much at the height of your career in many ways. And then to just reveal yourself and just reveal like behind the curtain was just incredible. So I'm just curious like what you think about that advice and like how you wrote that book when things are so present tense. Yeah,
that's a good question. You know, I think write what you know is the worst advice. It really is, because it's fiction. I mean, especially like when you think about fiction, it's fiction for a reason. And you can make it up. So write what you don't know. But I think it's thrilling to write what you don't know, to not have all the answers. Whether I'm writing fiction or nonfiction, oftentimes I'm writing toward answers. I'm trying to figure out the answers through my prose. And that's how I wrote Hunger. I dragged my heels for quite a long time. I delayed the book for a year, partly because I was scared, partly because I knew how I was going to have to make myself vulnerable. When you live in a fat body, everyone sees it. And they think about it, and they have opinions, and they project all kinds of things on that body. But it's another thing entirely to open up the truth of that body and say, this is how my body became this way, and here's why. And this is what it's like to live in this body. It was terrifying. I was terrified, not only in terms of readers, but my loved one reading this book and wondering what are they going to think, even though none of this ended up being a surprise. But it was overwhelming. But I knew it was also the only way to write this book. And I also knew that it was necessary, both for me and just for what I wanted to do at that point in my career. And it was scary to think, oh my gosh, I've amassed all this writer success, and now I might blow it all up with a book about fatness. But I have a day job, so I was willing to take that risk. And it was the right decision. And sometimes you don't have everything figured out, but you still have something worthwhile to say. Thank you.
There was your question here.
Yes, up there, go ahead. Oh, this poor microphone woman is really... I hope she has her Fitbit on today.
So and the next person on this side, you might want to start coming down this way because there are questions down here as well.
So I'm super pleased that that was the question, because I also have a writing question.
Okay.
How has your writing evolved?
When I first started writing, I was very young. I've been writing since I was 4. And of course, I was writing 4-year-old level stories when I was 4. But
they're great stories.
They were very good.
I have a 5-year-old, and
my stories were the bomb.
I would imagine,
but
they were.
They were like, 4 words. I am so happy.
That's deep.
The end. Especially during my teens, a lot of my writing was just me processing trauma without knowing that's what I was doing, though people around me recognized it, thank God. In my 20s, I was just processing my angst. In my 30s, I was processing what it means to mature. And in my 40s, I am finally using everything that I've been processing for the past 43 years to hopefully give voice to experiences that we don't hear enough about, and to provide platforms to people who are marginalized. And so I'm still a writer and I love writing, but for me now, as I look ahead to like the next 5 years, the most important thing for me is not what I'm writing, but what I'm encouraging other writers to do, and how I'm supporting those writers in getting their work into the world.
Well, that had me thinking about what shifts are you seeing in the publishing and communities and literary communities with regards to saying, okay, yeah, let's open that door wider.
We're seeing a lot of talk about change in publishing.
Mm-hmm. Did the microphone make it down here?
There's a person at top who's been waiting a very long time.
How far up?
Right there. Go ahead.
Okay. So with the Me Too movement, a lot of students at universities have been encouraged to share their stories and speak out against sexual violence on our campuses. And so my question is, what can universities do to better support their students?
Yes, that's a very good question. Universities can do several things. The first thing they can do is stop using campus police to adjudicate crimes that happen on campus, because those police are invested in their employer. I think that you need to be able to go to the city police because they have less of a vested interest in making the university look good. I think that they can do more in terms of expelling rapists, because you shouldn't have to go to school with the person who raped you. I think on far too many campuses, they use a sort of campus judiciary system to handle these cases, and that doesn't work. Again, that's serving the best interests of the institution rather than the student. I think campuses need more full-time sexual violence and domestic violence advocates, because these are real problems, and you need more than a graduate student volunteer, even though graduate students are incredible. But they should be focused on their students, and they can be part of the program because, especially for people who are getting training in mental health services, but you need a full-time person whose only job it is to advocate for victims of sexual violence.
I have actually some questions that were sent in online, and it kind of ties in a little bit to that question. Mohammed on Facebook, on the event page, had asked, has the Me Too movement impacted the ways in which readers interpret your work?
I don't think so. I think it has just made my work as timely as it ever was. Especially my most recent project actually isn't hunger. It's an anthology called Not That Bad. And it's a book about, a book of 29 essays about sexual violence from women and men, people across the gender spectrum. And it was a book I sold shortly after Bad Feminist came out, but that came out in June of this year. And it has been interesting to see how painfully timely it has bookended with Me Too. But I'm glad the book exists because it has offered what Me Too has offered, which is a space for people to share their stories and to be heard, and for them to acknowledge to themselves that what they went through was in fact as bad as they feel it was. Because I came up with the idea of Not That Bad because women in particular, but I think all victims of sexual violence, tend to minimize what happened to them. And they say, oh, he just did this, it wasn't that bad. Or he didn't have a knife, he didn't kill me, I knew him, it wasn't that bad. And we do this and we minimize what we suffer over and over again, and then our empathy becomes calloused. And we have no empathy for ourselves, and we have no empathy for other people. And that's what I wanted to challenge with this book, and I really wanted to find ways to interrogate rape culture and the roles that we all play in it. Thank you.
So many hands. Okay, so right here, I saw your hand, and then the lady right behind you, and then right here.
Oh, I met you earlier.
Yes, hi, my name is Crystal Lorraine Dawsa. First of all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to those that organized this, it's amazing. I am the co-founder, co-president of McGill's Black Alumni Association. I wish more of us had been able to come here and see. My question is a bit of a group question, but it's more of a funnier on a lighter note. I wanted to ask, when you're getting up in the morning, when you feel aggravated, what are your favorite Cardi B, Beyonce, and Rihanna songs?
Yeah. My favorite Rihanna song is S&M. My favorite Beyonce song is Hold Up. And my favorite Cardi B song is actually her first, Bodak Yellow. And all of those will get me going real good.
I just got the hand just so we have 5 minutes left.
All right.
So but there's
Haters gonna hate. I'll do this all night.
Why not? All right. Oh, thank you for saying that, Roxane. You just got us double the time.
All right.
All right. So there was another question just behind you. Yeah.
My first language is French. I'm gonna try to do my best to.
Roxane speaks French.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you speak French?
Oui, je parle français. Mais,
okay.
Je comprends français mieux que je parle français.
Okay. Yeah, me too. Like I really understand well English, but I think when I talk, it's not like good. Yeah. But I'm gonna try to do my best. Like I think these days with social media, young girls are super exposed to girls that really show a lot of her body, like almost naked, and they compare a lot to them. I don't think it's bad, I don't think it's good, but I think I don't really have, I can set my mind, because I feel like sometimes, yes, it's really good for the emancipation of the woman, but another way, I think like girls too much compare themselves and they try to aspire at that, because that type of girl most of the time have like 1 million followers and they are super like popular and they try to reach these goals. That's kind of maybe not easy to reach. So I would like to know what you think about that. Is it good or is it bad for the young girl? Because I don't really grow up with that type of social media, but I think it was if I was like 15 or 14, I don't know how I would gauge that.
Yes. That's a great question. You know, it's challenging because on the one hand, I think that people should be free to express themselves however they want. And so if you want to have an Instagram where you show off your amazing body day in and day out, good for you. I mean, it's aspirational, like whatever, great. But the problem is that that's what we consider aspirational is so narrow. It's only thin women with narrow waists, large breasts, and perfect hips. And so you're never going to see a woman who weighs a little bit more, like who maybe weighs 200 pounds but carries it very well, or who weighs 500 pounds and carries it however she wants to carry it. If we saw more women across the body spectrum doing these kinds of things, it would all be great. The problem is that we only see one kind of woman. And then we have young girls who are trying to starve themselves and contort themselves to this very narrow, singular ideal. And that's where that's the nexus of a lot of eating disorders and a lot of mental health issues, because you get really depressed when you think, I am never going to look like her. And it's really hard, but I don't blame the women who are modeling and doing all of this Instagram stuff. I'm so old, Instagram stuff. You know what I mean? Influencers. But I do blame the culture that treats that woman as the only way a woman can be. And so we have to flood social media with a broader range. And we're starting to see that with the body positivity movement. But unfortunately, it has been co-opted by women who are skinny and who are like, I'm a size 4 and I'm gonna eat this yogurt. Oh, body pause. And I'm just like, girl, that's not body positivity at all. So we just, we have to increase representation, and we have to truly show that we as a culture value all bodies at all sizes.
I'm gonna let you choose. I feel so...
Okay, right up there, and then this young woman down here.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and primarily I would like to thank you for bringing recognition to, what it's like to be the only Black kid in your class, because I have experienced that all throughout being in school, so thank you. And second, my question is, earlier on in the evening, you mentioned that though you were looking into the audience, you saw a lot of people, but you didn't see a lot of Black people. So what do you think we as Black people can do to get more involved in discussions that involve us?
Yes. I don't know that it's Black people that have to do that work. I think that Black people are perfectly willing to be involved, but I think that we have to be able to hold events like this in larger spaces, for one. We have to be able to do outreach directly into our communities. And so if you just put a notice on a website, is the Black community gonna find it? Not necessarily. So I think organizers of events like this need to go directly into those communities and to community leaders there. And more than that, they also need to provide transportation and material support to bring people of color and Black people specifically to these events. Black people are perfectly willing to engage in intellectual conversations, but intellectual conversations exclude them in a lot of different kinds of ways that are very subtle, but their exclusions are there nonetheless. Down here.
Right down here. You can shout your question. No.
Yeah, I can hear you. Or we could just start throwing it like a frisbee. Just
So my question was, so Islamophobia is on the rise pretty much everywhere right now. And as a Muslim woman, I scroll on social media and see people, non-Muslim people, giving up their opinions about hijab and what Muslim people should do. Pretty much like white people have been doing to Black people all their lives, about opinions about Black Lives Matter and all those stuff that don't actually concerns them in a way, but it's not about them. So when I scroll, I often feel the need to educate people about the subject, but it's impossible, and you get so frustrated because it comes from a personal place. And my question is, how do you choose your battles? How do you deal with, you often on Twitter, people saying stuff, and that comes from a personal background?
Well, on Twitter, I will say, I'm not really trying to do anything other than make myself feel better. When I clap back, there's no nobility to it. I'm not trying to make the world a better place. I'm truly just if you are dumb and you say some racist, homophobic, sexist shit to me, and you can't spell, which is oftentimes the case. All of these trolls and these horrible racist people cannot spell, and I'm just master race my ass. You have 2 teeth, shut up. So that's just me being petty and me being vindictive and also hurt, yes, and so I'm lashing out on Twitter in a really controlled way, so it's fine. In actual life, I pick my battles. When I was younger, I just picked every battle, and I burned myself out. And so now I just try to pick battles by looking at what I have to offer to a given conversation, and if it would be better for me to listen or to speak. And if I feel like it's appropriate for me to speak, I want to make sure that my time and energy are being valued, so I only try to reach people that can be reached. People on Twitter can't be reached. I know they can't be reached, but when I write an essay for the paper, then I'm thinking about people beyond myself, people that might disagree with me. I think, how do I reach them? The ones that can be reached. And a lot of what I think we're seeing right now in activist circles is people trying to reach the unreachable. Time and again, people say, how do I reach Trump voters? And I'm just like, you can't. They're not reachable because they don't care what he does. And if they do care, they like it. And so we have to reach the people that actually didn't go and vote. This is within the United States. We have to, reach people who did not vote, or the moderates who are reachable. When it comes to Islamophobia, which is getting worse, and which is state-sanctioned here in Canada, it's state-sanctioned across Europe, and it's certainly state-sanctioned in the United States. Again, you have to find people that are reachable, people that understand the difference between Islam and Islamist extremists, which are two different things. And I find that comparisons work because white extremists do crazy shit all the time, and white people still walk around feeling like they don't have to be responsible for the worst among them. And so I think using those kinds of analogies to reach people is important. And I also think that, especially, and I write about this in Bad Feminists, especially with things like the hijab and other cultural practices, it's not my business, it's not my place. I defer to Muslim women who I have no doubt are able to make decisions for themselves about whether or not they wear the hijab and why. And I trust that they can be just as feminist as anyone else in making that choice. Like, how dare I challenge your culture because it's something that I don't understand? And I think it's also important to make that clear, that whatever choices you make for yourself and for how you move through the world are just as valuable as the choices that someone else would make. Thank you.
Oh, I knew I shouldn't have turned my eye. I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
We have to wrap.
Haters.
I know. Are you gonna write another comic book?
I am. I'm working on a 6-issue series called The Banks, which is about 3 generations of black women who are master thieves in Chicago.
Oh. There you go. It's been a pleasure sitting and chatting with you.
Thank you, Nantali. It's been a lovely evening.
Montreal, let's give another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you!
We do have some final words, and so I'd like to ask Inez Jabalpurwala, the president and CEO at Brain Canada Foundation and president of the McGill Alumni Association, to join us on stage to offer McGill's thanks and closing remarks.
Thank you, Natalia. Now, how do I follow this? As president of the McGill Alumni Association, I'm absolutely delighted to be sharing this afternoon with all of you who are here in person and those who are live streaming this remarkable presentation by Professor Roxane Gay. The McGill Alumni Association represents McGill's global community of more than 275,000 alumni in more than 180 countries. And our role is to support our graduates and ensure that they remain engaged and connected to the university. Events like the Beatty Lecture are central to a diverse and vibrant university community. and they are a wonderful opportunity for McGill's graduates to connect with students, faculty, staff, and friends. We applaud the tradition of the Beatty lectures who inform us, who challenge us, who inspire us, as Professor Gay has this afternoon. I would like to thank Nantali Ndongo for introducing the lecture and moderating the question and answer session with her usual tact, humor, and grace. If you haven't already discovered Nantali on CBC Radio 1's program, The Bridge, I really invite you to tune in. It is an excellent window on the arts and cultural scene in Quebec. I thank the members of the Beatty Committee and my colleagues at University Advancement for all of their hard work in making this event such a success. I thank Dean Antonia Maioni and everyone at the Faculty of Arts for hosting the Beatty Lecture, and thanks to the Vice Principal of Research and Innovation, Martha Crago, and her team. And of course, a thanks to all of you for joining us today and for everyone who is returning to our campus to participate in this year's Homecoming Celebration Weekend. Now finally, on behalf of everyone at McGill, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Professor Roxane Gay. And with the formalities completed, allow me to go off script and tell you just how enriched I was in reading your work. Bad Feminist was thought-provoking and intellectual revelation. Difficult Women and Hunger, emotionally challenging, and they continue to haunt me. In the pages of Hunger, I could feel the soul-crushing loneliness of a story not told and a trauma which plays out in many different manifestations, something that I've learned a lot about in my role as CEO of Brain Canada. Narrative is both about finding one's voice and about making sense of the events in our lives which help shape that voice. And I accepted the role with the McGill Alumni Association because I wanted to carry forth the message of diversity that this university models. That true diversity, while it may be messy and complicated and uncomfortable, is a recognition that every voice has value, that every story needs to be heard, and not just the stories that reinforce our stereotypes. As Viola Davis replied when asked about roles for women in Hollywood, we just want roles for women. We don't always need to be fighting the Ku Klux Klan. I will tell every young woman that I meet and that I mentor, be the heroine of your own story. In someone else's narrative, the most that you can ever aspire to be is a supporting character. So thank you, Professor Gay, for telling your story and for having given us the wonderful gift of your presence here this afternoon. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful evening.